Whitney Call and Mallory Everton, usually busy writing and acting in sketch comedy, took the pause created by the pandemic to make their first feature film, something they'd been wanting to do for a long time. They're best known for their work as original members of the sketch comedy show Studio C and their multiple online TV series created by their own production company, JK Studios. The two join us to discuss their unique journey in filmmaking and reveal the meaning and practical wisdom that came out of making their pandemic-inspired COVID comedy, Recovery. If you want more insightful conversations like this, subscribe to the Sorø Films Podcast, available today on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. We hope you enjoy.
All right, Whitney Call, when would you say that our filmmaking journey began?
Well, that's a tricky question. Filmmaking in like lowercase f.
Yeah, lowercase f filmmaking.
That's like a long journey. 1998? 98, 99? We were making commercials together and with our family camcorder.
Yeah. We were 8.
Yeah, we were 8. And what was I remember we made like a toilet in the elevator.
Elevator toilet.
Elevator toilet. I don't know where any of that footage is. And then we started making soap operas, graduating to more narrative filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just all sorts of things. We kind of just made things all the time when we got together, which I don't know if that's every person's experience when they're kids, but man, I know lots of friends who got their parents' camcorders and just had at it.
Right. Where do you think it really came from? Do you think it was the fact that we both watched SNL? Do you think it was that, I mean, and it started with you. I wasn't doing it with friends before that.
I don't know if I was doing it with friends before that either. Something just clicked with us when we met. I know that my siblings would make stuff for like school, and so we had a camcorder. But in terms of actually getting together with friends and making things, it was you. It was always you.
It was me.
I think it was, I don't know, we were both the youngest siblings of families that were considerably older than we were. So we were watching a lot of movies with them, watching a lot of SNL, watching, tons of stuff together.
Lots of PG-13
Lots of PG-13 movies that we probably shouldn't have. And I think just like recreating stuff was really fun for us. We both liked acting and we liked performing.
You gave me that bug though.
Oh, yeah?
You know that, right? Like, I didn't want to act at all before I knew you.
Really?
No.
You didn't want to? That's fun.
I don't think so, at least. I don't have any memory of even thinking it was an option until I knew you were in, like, a high school play when we were, like, 9 or 10.
10, yeah.
And then, I mean, you were so gung-ho about it that I was like, is this an option? Is this, like, something that people can do?
My family's, like, thing.
That was your thing.
Everyone liked performing.
Jamie was your older sister who dated my older brother. That was their thing.
But yeah, I guess that's true. None of your siblings really did plays or anything.
No, I had a very talented musician older brother, but the rest of the Evertons, we were all just like,
contribute to society.
Don't play some good sports, but don't show off.
Don't show off.
There was no like shame about that or anything, but
no, the calls were all about showing off. That was our MO. So I think we tempered each other a little bit, maybe. Maybe it was like fun to have a friend who wasn't as showy as my family. So I actually felt like I was the show off in the group. I don't know. I haven't thought about that. What drove us to like make stuff together? But it was fun. So I think that's what kept me coming back to wanting to make things with you is like staying up on New Year's Day and just like making a CSI spoof until like 6 a.m.
Yeah, we would stay up every New Year's Eve and we'd make a CSI spoof where Whitney played the detective and the victim, the murder victim, and I played all the suspects. And the creepy mortician.
That's what I loved too. It was that like gender fluidity in our videos was always like across the board.
You were always a man.
I was always a man because I thought that was the most fun role to play was the men part.
You weren't wrong. Men had way more to do in the 90s.
So I was, I was the detective and I guess you were into me as the mortician.
Oh yeah. So handsome.
It was a big part of my childhood. I don't really remember much else about my childhood.
You blocked it out.
I blocked most of that stuff out. But and then we got to high school and started like actually being in plays and stuff together. But did we keep making stuff in high school? I think it kind of petered out around 9th grade, right?
Yeah, I mean, we did plays and stuff. We both did musicals and plays. We were in the same high school, and we did we were the old ladies in Arsenic and Old Lace together. I know we made one. Do you remember we made one CSI Miami? So we would have been like
I think that
15
was I think that was like the first year of high school.
Yeah, I feel like maybe we did one in high school, and I just remember that you died by having a snake stuffed into your mouth.
I remember in that one, though, we were much more conscientious about how to, like, really do it intentionally.
Oh, yeah.
So we were like, well, the guy in CSI Miami is always making those stupid quips. So, like, let's do a one-liner to, like, spoof off of this.
Right. I was probably, 2 months into my first broadcast journalism class. Which became like one of my high school passions. Yeah, I mean, we started it. We started the fire for each other.
Yeah,
it's very fun.
It's pretty cool, and we still get to do it together. That's the crazy weird thing. We talk about that all the time. Just like every time we're doing a new project, it's like, remember when we were 8 and we were like, this is fun. And now we get paid to do it, or don't get paid.
Or don't get paid.
But we still do it. Oh, good times. Good times. Well, I have a question for you, Mal. With this movie that we made, where did the idea come from behind Recovery? And just kind of like, why don't you go over like what those initial conversations were and how we brought it to life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like there's no way to really talk about the movie without sort of backing up a couple of years. Like Whitney and I both of us did. Sorry. It's like you can cut that out if you want.
We're not talking to anyone else. It's just us in here.
There's no one else in this room. We were both doing Studio C, which is a sketch comedy show. And we both really liked it, but we both didn't want to do sketch forever. Had other passions and other things we wanted to do, a lot more interest in kind of movies and TV and storytelling in general. It
wasn't even what we went to school for necessarily.
No.
That was like our side gig that we had fun with after class or something,
You went to school for creative writing and I went to school for film. So,
but then we got jobs doing sketch.
We got jobs doing sketch, which felt connected to what we both wanted to do. Oh, I'm writing creatively, and I am in like the room with film, But when we left and we started this web series company with all of our various cast members. And I think we were still trying to figure out how to scratch the itches that we felt while we were there. And we weren't really sure. And we started talking about side projects on the side of like other things that we could be making even outside of our web series company, which in a lot of ways felt like a dream. We were making web series with our friends, but it was still sort of like working for a client and trying really hard to, and also because it was with our sketch comedy friends, as funny as possible at all times.
Joke every 8 seconds.
So it wasn't necessarily like, what's in your heart? You know what I mean? Like, which I think every filmmaker can relate to. Like, no one's asking you what's in your heart when you're starting. You're just like filling a brief or, trying your best to be what people think you are already. Like, or, we were really lucky, like we were able to establish a little bit of an audience. And then that audience is like, I know you as this, and this is all I want from you, all I want to see,
Yeah, it was a little bit of pigeonholing, I guess.
Right.
It was a decade of experience in one area.
And super, super fun, but a person is just so many things, So I feel like we had started talking about side projects and other things we wanted to talk about. I had like a very HBO style show that I was like, this is way too dark for anyone in our audience. I don't even know if I could write this, and I feel like maybe people would be so offended by it. And you had a bunch of other things that you were talking about, including a show called Roadrunners, where it was about two sisters who were going on a cross country road trip to
Portland.
dispose of a body.
To
right?
dispose of a body.
That was like the main goal. And you were starting to crank out episodes, and we were kind of just dreaming about a time when we might be able to make something that we just wanted to make. You know, it wasn't really about, you know, what would make us money, what would bring in like the next job or something like that. It was sort of like, what would we make if we could make anything we wanted?
And it was also always the obstacle of, well, how do we make this? How do we get it funded? How do we get it up and running? And I don't know. That seems to be a question that a lot of first-time filmmakers end up running into all the time. You have a script, and then you're like, cool. Who wants to help me make this script?
Who will even read it?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And once they read it, it's like, great, I'm a person who doesn't have any money. I liked it though. Or something like that, you know?
That was constantly my experience. I know like that was always a question we had was, how do we do it out? How do we do it after this?
Right. And you had written another screenplay that would have required an older actress, hopefully someone who was a bigger name in order to even be able to make it. So I think we both were at this stage where we were sort of like, kind of in this transition from our sketch comedy careers and trying to figure out like, what is it that we really want to do? And is it even possible to make a transition into, is it independent filmmaking? Are we writing sitcoms and then trying to get them sold in LA? Like, how do we do this? You know? And then we were in the middle of finishing and we kept getting jobs at JK. We like had a lot of writing to do all the time. So we wrote
Busy Bees,
3 web series over the course of like, late 2018 to the end of 2019. We were filming that and then editing it when the pandemic started. So we were just finishing, like giving notes and finishing edits and stuff on that stuff. And we had gotten a lot of experience from our web series company. We were in like super great spot where we knew.
We were scrappy.
Very scrappy.
I mean, I'd say.
It was dumpster work, but it was decent.
I've taken like 10 years off of my life, but I know, right? I know how to make something cheap and fast.
Not live past 50. There's just no way. But yeah, so the pandemic hits, and at first, you know, I mean, I think everybody understands what that felt like. It was horrible and terrifying and anxiety provoking, and then isolating and boring and hopeless, you know? So we decided like, hey, I mean, we might as well strike up our side convo. We always are like dreaming about what we can do next.
And
you
that,
know?
I feel like only could happen after 3 months of my like despair and rock bottom. Because I think at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, what's the point?
Totally.
Why would I ever want to do anything again?
Will there even be a world after this?
It's just going to be taken from under me. So I may as well never try again.
Yeah. I mean,
the feeling.
We didn't start talking until June.
Yeah.
So I think we both spent our months, you know, collecting urine in jars and all that stuff, or whatever it is that like describes
your
symbolically your pandemic, you know. So we started talking about basically like, is there any way that we can create like a little bit of motivation, a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
Just by talking about ideas. So I was working on a sitcom script at the time, and we started talking a little bit about Roadrunners. And then we started thinking like, is there anything that could be made now?
Yeah.
Because if that were the case, then now is the perfect time for us to do whatever we want with our own money. Because generally, doing that would mean saying no to another job or giving up some other kind of opportunity, or it would take too much time. But we have nothing but time right now. In fact, truly nothing. We have time only. It's our only resource.
It's our only friend.
It's our only resource. So we started kind of talking around that Roadrunners idea with all of that context in mind. I know it was like a long-winded way to get there, but that was our experience. Well, it took a long time.
You had been watching like tons of
bottle movies.
Like The Trip, I remember, was something that just changed your world in terms of like, a movie does not have to be like inciting incident, threshold, world gets turned upside down, B plot, Dark Night of the Soul. You know, it doesn't have to be everything.
Well, and I'd seen that movie when it came out, and I remember thinking like, I was interested the whole time. Was it just Tom Hardy, or what was happening with the story?
Oh, so Locke.
Oh, did I say Locke? Oh,
I said The Trip.
Yeah, I'd seen Locke when it came out, and I was like enraptured the entire time and thought, how did they do this? I know Tom Hardy's incredible. He's extremely handsome and his accent is very cool.
But he was sick while filming, so he wasn't even like in his like top form, and it was still.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe I like sick Tom Hardy even more.
Sick Tom Hardy, and there's some animal magnetism there.
Disgusting. I think like the second time around, I was like looking for clues. So I was just marking like every time the story moved and what really happened and how they did it, really, because I cannot remember the name of the screenwriter, but he's brilliant. And it really just sort of demystified the idea of what a screenplay really is to me. And I think like to all aspiring filmmakers, I think it's very, very, very good to throw the book out and watch something that breaks the mold like that and recognize that a movie is just something that lasts 90 minutes. And you can figure out how you use those 90 minutes.
Or 80 minutes.
Or 80 minutes. Ours is only 80 minutes. In fact, I think it was Sundance like feature requirement is only like 50.
50 plus.
So think about that. Your dreams may be closer than you think.
Yep.
But yeah, so I just started recognizing that they had sort of picked like an A, B, C and sort of a thin D, and then they just braided it.
Yeah.
So we talked about doing something that was just a braid like that and making it as simple as possible. And we were like, it's a road trip movie. So it'll be so easy.
It'll be simple.
It'll be so easy. Just you and me in a car, and we'll just fit the camera in there, and the angles will be perfect, and it'll be done.
I think about that all the time.
Really complicated, but writing was truly delightful, though.
Writing was delightful.
We had a great time writing it.
And it was a quick writing time, too. It was 2 weeks, basically.
Yeah. I mean, what we ended up doing was, for me, I have super terrible ADD. So approaching anything longer than a sketch has been brutal for me since we left Studio C. Just feeling like this is exhausting. You have a big idea, it's up in the clouds and it's gorgeous, and you have to wrestle it down to the earth and completely ruin it. And and you start to put it on paper and realize like this thing you thought was really great, it just like slips through your fingers. It doesn't work as well. An outline is like everything to me now. And we had such a good experience with our outline. We basically we took a suggestion that I had just received from a friend. He's like, I just basically write 1 to 80. And I put all of like the different like my favorite scenes and try and figure out kind of where they're going to go 1 to 80 on that list of scenes. And then I just fill them in until I feel like I have enough to start my draft. I thought it was like the best advice ever, and it helped us so much.
Digestible. It made it like not this scary process anymore. Because I feel like when you're trying to beat a movie out, like trying to write it out in beats, that's when it's like, well, everything needs to mean something. Everything needs to which like you don't want to have anything extraneous in your movie, but when you're just able to look at it in terms of numbers and you're like, this is like roughly about how many scenes are in a movie, and these are the things I'm looking forward to putting in there. So let's just start from there. Made it so much easier for me to approach as like this doable map. And so that was really interesting to kind of work out with you and just like know that we had like 3 different plots that we were trying to follow and just kind of like wrapping them around each other until they all.
Right. And I feel like Recovery, the way it ended up turning out, it probably seems like slightly more lackadaisical than, it's definitely more lackadaisical than Locke, which was something we were very inspired by. But we did try really hard to like, okay, B's going to come right on the heels of C, or like sometimes this A plot and B plot are going to be in the same scene together for a second or something like that. Because we were just trying, we were very aware of like those different braids and trying to scatter them and stagger them, so that the plot was still moving, even if it's not moving at a super fast pace. It's a road trip movie, and we did a lot of kind of playing too. It was extremely helpful for us to actually get it done and to actually tell a story of some kind. Because I think, you have the option of making any kind of movie you want. I mean, look at like Monty Python or Airplane. Those are just like sketch movies where you just like make other like various funny vignettes and then like barely string them together, and you watch it just because it's funny. You can make something that's just beautiful to watch. And, I think it's just kind of changing, just reminding yourself, like, what are you really telling yourself a movie is? And maybe you just take off some of those chains and get into the process. I'm trying to think too. So we did that outline. And then I think maybe it was the first or second day of writing, we just decided, because this is another suggestion I would have for people who are writing. I don't know what you would say about this. Like, if you're more a person who likes page length, I kind of like just time, like as a writer. If I say I'm going to put in 2-3 hours a day or something, and I do that, I just feel so much more satisfied, and it's easier for me, especially with my short attention span, to say like, well, I put in the time today.
Yep.
And it's not the same as me having a full screenplay done, but every day you put in that time, it will get easier.
Well, and some days it brings the guilt out of like, well, today was only a 2-page day.
Right.
But you spent that amount of time because maybe it was a freaking hard scene to write, and you really were trying to like get the nuances of characters into it or something like that. And then maybe some days you get like 10 pages in those 2 or 3 hours, but you realize that like not every day is going to be the same. And so giving time length, I feel like, is like 100% the way I would go.
Well, and I just finished Shonda Rhimes' book. It was very interesting. She's a fascinating person. She is the highest paid showrunner in the world as well, which is really no surprise. She's such a powerhouse as far as just like creating constantly stuff that people love.
It's consumable.
It's very consumable content. But she describes like her happy place like she says that her happy place is writing in the pantry. Like as a child, that's like where she did all of her imagining. So when she's in flow in writing, she like calls it the pantry. But she's like, you have to run 5 miles every time you want to go into that pantry. And along the way are all these distractions and all these demons and all of these things that you have to get better and better at ignoring to get into that pantry.
Right.
And so I think that setting some kind of time limit every day is a good way to like get to the pantry. Like the goal is to get to the pantry, like find at least 5 minutes, where you actually felt like you got something down.
Yeah.
Because I think we spend all this time sort of maybe romanticizing our ideas or like, overthinking them to the point where it's hard to even, like I was saying, like wrestle them down from the sky.
Well, and I feel like my approach to it is maybe a little bit inverted from your approach, because mine is that like I'll just like get it out. Like I write it all down, and then I'll look at it afterwards and be like, oh crap, like, this was terrible. And I just end up like scrapping a page or two before I can actually get going again. But that's my 5 miles of just like, I don't think it at all. And then I write it, and then I rethink it and have to recreate it. And so I feel like it definitely makes sense to like just get going whatever process you have, and give yourself that time limit.
Yeah. Well, and so we made a schedule. We just decided that we were going to try and write every morning for, 2 hours or something. And I think it was 2 days into filming, we realized that the Sundance deadline was the beginning of July.
2 days into writing, yeah.
And this was the beginning of July, and the Sundance deadline for like the late deadline, like the last possible time you could submit was like October 6th or 2nd or something like that. So we had...
You like sent me a text at night.
Yeah.
You were like, should we?
For us, we approached this as I described, we approached this just because we wanted something.
We weren't even considering, like, we were thinking, like, maybe we'll get to film this eventually, but we could film it if we wanted to because we're writing it doably. Like,
right. That was kind of our thought. Like, this is something we thought we could maybe make, but we didn't think we were going to submit it anywhere or do anything. It was just we were going to write something that could possibly be made during this horrible time.
That deadline, that was a fire. That was like where I finally felt like not just like pressure, but like excitement. It was like, whoa, we could actually make something that means something, which is a terrible way to think because everything means something. And this whole process would have been so beneficial for me had I never submitted this anywhere. But just knowing that like there was something outside of myself, which it was just me this whole pandemic. So like having finally something entering into the equation that was outside of me, outside of my control, felt invigorating because I was like, I haven't been used to this for months.
It gave us purpose.
Yeah.
During a very purposeless time. And I think it's honestly, this is maybe just like a life sidebar, but I think it's really, really healthy to acknowledge that we often just create our purpose. We don't have to like spend our lives finding it or any, like I think some people really take a lot of comfort in the idea that they really understand why they're here on the planet. But I think most of us just find something that gives our day value and meaning. It's like, I really love my job, or I feel like I am put here to figure out, like, to help these kids get out into the world, or whatever it is, like, I think that for a time we had our temporary purpose, which was like, we are going to use this pandemic to learn how to make movies because it's something we've always wanted to do and never been able to justify or have time to truly try.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to go for it. And I just remember thinking, remember being super scared. I remember saying, like, we are going to do this. We're going to go for it, but we have to pull the plug if we feel like we're ruining it to get it done in 3 months. Like, that's a crazy
we wanted to be
timeline
realistic
for a movie, and we haven't even written it yet. And we're trying to say we're going to submit it to like top tier festivals in 3 months, and we've never made one before. We've made web series and sketches and a bunch of videos on our family's camcorder when we were children, but we have not made a movie yet. And it felt like very scary. And we just, said that we would pull the ripcord if we felt like we were ruining it, and we never did.
It was definitely the test of like, how in it are we going to be here?
Are we actually doing this?
And that's when we talked about, okay, how much money can we pool together, the three of us, because Stephen had joined on at this point, and we were asking if he would help us produce and direct. And so we said, okay, if we pool our resources together, how much can we actually give to a film? And we had gotten our friend Dave and Stephen's parents to also join on and help us, which was amazing that we had just talked some people into giving us thousands of dollars.
Right.
So we had been able to pool together like a few thousands, a few tens of thousands of dollars, and which is not nothing. And I recognize like lots of people don't even have that much to spend on a film. But that was also, we'd gotten a PPP loan from the government.
Oh, yes, we had.
So we had just gotten anywhere we could some resources to just like keep getting a few at a time to say, okay, we went to our friend Babetta and said, can we actually make a movie for this much?
This amount of money.
And she went through her budget and said, we can. So we decided.
Because she's a goddess.
Because she is, and she knows how to make things work. We also, after like 10 plus years of experience working in this field, had garnered a beautiful community of film people.
Yeah, and favorites.
Yes. And so we knew exactly, like, we want Brenna for DPing, we want Brendan for sound, we want, all these different things that we knew we wanted. And we're able to ask them for favors.
Right.
And we never wanted to have anyone work for free or deferred payment. Like, that was never what we wanted to do.
Especially for a movie that we genuinely were like, we are making this for experience. And we're making this to hopefully get on the radar of some new friends and some new people we can network with, but we cannot guarantee. Like, we're not going to be like, we'll pay you on the back end for this pandemic movie we're making while the world blows up.
Right.
Like, genuinely, everything was in question at the time.
We just thought essentially we were pouring money into a drain, and that eventually, hopefully, we would get like some sort of experience out of it. But yeah, so being able to like ask people for like, what's the lowest rate you would take for this movie?
Right.
But I think everyone was on board because they were like, hey, you're making a movie right now? And no one was doing it. And they knew that, like, I mean, we weren't making any money on this.
That it was just a true
passion project.
Yeah.
So we got all our faves. We got like our whole community together. Yeah, we were super lucky with our crew. And so we were able to get everyone on a quick schedule, and for everyone to be free those 2 weeks that we were filming was another miracle. Just another like moment where we recognize, like, it feels like we
just are on track. We
should be doing this.
Yeah.
It felt like
right
it was
place.
Yeah, right place, right time. So pre-production started happening, and then Babetta we had a COVID scare.
Right. Her sister, who was working at BYU TV, had someone on Studio C where she worked got it. So everyone had to go and quarantine and get tested. And Babetta almost had to pull out last minute, which was crazy because we were also filming a ton in her house.
Yep.
Because of the pandemic restrictions and everything, we tried to keep everything as contained as possible.
We filmed like 3 different locations in that house.
Yeah. And then, obviously a ton in the car, as much outdoor stuff as we possibly could to try and keep those things safe as well.
And with a skeleton crew. So, I mean, we had, I think, 7 people on set usually, including us.
Yeah.
So bare bones, trying to keep it as small as possible, trying to keep it as safe as possible. But
trying
again,
to touch as little as possible.
this was July now that we were starting to film. We still had no access to tests. If you wanted to just go and get tested, you could go if you had symptoms or if you had a doctor's note or if you worked for a huge corporation that was giving you access to testing. But you couldn't actually go and just get one at this point.
It was harder, at least.
It was harder.
Yeah.
And so luckily our crew had been getting tested frequently from their other projects. So we just basically banked on everyone quarantining and taking temperatures at the beginning of every day and just keeping masks and hand sanitizing. But we really couldn't take any other precautions besides that.
Right. Eventually, it sort of felt like we were bubbling as a tiny little crew.
Mm-hmm.
We still wore masks whenever we weren't on camera, and the crew wore masks and everything. And we tried to be fairly distanced when we ate and things like that. But we got very lucky. No one got it.
No one got it. We did have an AD throw up on set.
Yeah.
But that was just heat stroke. That was
which happened.
Dear Summer, she was a trooper. I just looking at the actual production process. That's probably when I first started feeling like maybe this isn't meant to happen.
No, I mean, do you remember our first day of filming?
Our first day, I think, is the worst day of filming I've ever experienced.
And we've had thousands, right?
Yeah.
And it was genuinely, we had all this, piss and vinegar, and we were so, this is kind of great. We're going for it. We're going to go for it. We're going to send our film into Sundance.
Our first 4 hours?
We spent the first
half day.
The first half day filming 2/3 a page.
It was a montage in rollerblades that did not fit us because I was getting all the props by asking people on Facebook.
Right.
So I asked anyone if they had rollerblades, and we borrowed Jason's and we borrowed another man's rollerblades. So we had 2 adult male-sized rollerblades, and they were not structured because Jason's was inline skating or something because they didn't.
Fancy people, and they're supposed to be very well fit to your feet, and my feet were too small in there. So I was in so much pain.
I was in those skates for just the last hour of filming that day, and I started getting blisters. And I was I can't do this. I don't know how Mal did this for 6 hours.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
And we had Bane. We had the dog with us,
We had the dog, and he's really sweet and old.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of hard. It's always hard. Children and dogs, everybody knows it's hard. It's going to add time to your schedule. But in the future, I would just suggest to anyone who is doing some kind of guerrilla filmmaking, anything, start with something that's going to feel like a really quick win. Like a scene you can get out in 3 hours or something like that. Because you just get to feel amazing. Because by the time we were eating lunch and we were we filmed a montage that is not even crucial to the story. We might cut it,
And it took up 2 paragraphs.
It was that was really hard. We both got extremely sunburned on day 1 as well.
And
so did Steven.
We had set up the luau, which was a huge part of the plot.
Yes.
We had set that up for the second half of the day. It was going to be a very tight schedule as it was.
And it required us to assemble a certain number of extras, which was also very stressful at the time.
No one wanted to be by each other.
Nobody wanted to be by each other, and we didn't want anyone to feel unsafe either.
I didn't want to ask anyone to come.
So you were trying to approach families who could kind of stay in clusters and that we could distance and keep apart from each other.
So we'd gathered all these extras. And then a storm came in.
A windstorm hit.
Randomly. Which just, when you're filming something chronologically and you just had a montage that leads into the next scene and it's completely different weather.
Right.
You can't do it.
Can't do it. And then we lost our location for the next day, which was the dog breeder scene day.
And we had a fantastic location.
We
had written the scene around it.
Yeah, we'd written the scene and then seen the location and tweaked it so that we could block it to the specific space we were in, and we lost that location.
So it was we basically got 2/3 of a page done in an entire day and had to scrap everything else and lost our location for the next day.
Super sunburned for our entire film shoot.
Yeah.
As well.
I went to Smith's that day to get some more stuff for our next day of filming. And because we had new phone covers as props for the show, I didn't have my card with me anymore because I carry it with my phone. And when I didn't realize that till I'd gotten to the store. So I just stopped in the parking lot and just cried.
Yeah.
I just was we're not we're not doing this. We had a good run.
We're just a bunch of silly hacks. Don't know. Like I journaled about it that night and just said this was like the worst day ever.
I assumed literally, I was like, well, there it goes. Like, we're not going to do this movie.
Yeah. All of my sort of, I think we're in the right place at the right time. This is like, we're right on track feelings completely gone.
Yep.
And the next morning we drove out to the next location and we kind of just
forgot your mask.
I forgot my mask.
Yeah.
And it was like an hour away.
It was a prop mask. Like, we needed to have the same ones. So we had to have someone else drive.
My sister drove it out, but that took like 2 hours. So we had to start like 3 hours late at a new location where we rewrote the scene to fit with this new location.
The first 2 days, I think, were
brutal.
They were like
for sure. They were for sure. It was baptism by fire.
Yeah.
And it was so, I mean, the way
we had a new crew too. Like, we had our favorites, but we also had like a few people we'd never worked with before. Some people, this was their first film set.
Right.
Because it was just like we were getting who we could get. And so like our grip was, bless his heart, like so new. Right. And he was our only grip.
Right.
So we were trying to set up
moving quickly
extensive sets for lighting that just like it was just going to take a while. That's what you get with a small crew.
Well, and that day was super complicated. Like, we talked to Steven about directing the movie for us, and he and I ended up co-directing the movie. I love directing, but I really struggle directing when I'm on camera. And I was like, I don't want to be in a situation where I feel like I receive no direction if something I'm doing is wooden or isn't working. So Steven was incredible. But that day, he and I were both acting. So we asked our friend Lane to come and direct that day. So one day, like, unit directors there that day, we start hours late. And it was just, it sort of felt like, I mean, I don't know if there's like an actual like archetype of this in all filmmaking, that like your first 2 days are going to be pure hell. You have to push through it or something. You have to.
Because honestly, because Stephen and I had talked to Vanessa and Joseph Winter after all of this was done, and they were making Deadstream,
yeah,
which they had been putting months into. They had spent like half a year getting this into the works, and pre-production took way longer for them. They put in the time that we wished we could have put in.
And we did not put in the time. So there were times where I feel like we didn't earn it.
But they still they couldn't use their whole first day of filming, they told me. Because they were just like, it was so hard to get everything done. And Joseph, who was directing and, well, no, Vanessa was directing, but he was in his director's mindset too.
And wasn't he sort of DPing? Because it's like a GoPro film?
Yeah, it was a GoPro film. Yeah. Anyway, he was so wooden the whole time from acting because everything was so just crazy that they just couldn't use any of that footage. So it just was like, it was a reminder to me of like, I think that's just what indie filming is. Like, indie filmmaking is going to be rough when you're all getting like on the same page. You're trying to have kismet. You're trying to get on like this rowing team with your crew. Right. But in the meantime, you're still trying to make scenes work when none of you are on that yet.
So maybe just expect bumps.
Expect big bumps.
Big bumps, like bumps that make you doubt yourself as a human being. Like, it was definitely a struggle because we'd felt so much kind of joy through the writing process, just like on Zoom calls together, just improvising silly scenes and stuff. And then feeling like, are all of our silly scenes and our pandemic, is it worth like the pain that we're creating? Right. Is it worth, like, will we ruin? That's the question I always have on anything that I ever make. Because film is it's a team sport. Yeah. So when I make something and I feel like, this is gonna be crap, I just think, well, I've wasted everyone's time. Yep. And I could have created more opportunities for these people by creating something that maybe people really liked that they could bring up in a conversation or an example they could put on a resume. But instead, I've made them look bad. Right. Like they are not talented, and that isn't true. And so I think that's just like the demon you always carry around. It's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. I feel like it's important to at least acknowledge that reality, that you have the power. Because to me, there's always like a business element. You're creating a business whenever you're
creating opportunities for everyone.
You're creating
hopefully everyone feels that way.
Yeah, and the hope is, like, I went to this insane thing in LA a couple months after I moved there, and right before the pandemic started. Where they were talking, it was a panel for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And someone asked the question of the actor who played Bruce Lee in that movie, what's it like to be on a Quentin Tarantino set? And he was like, well, the thing about being on a Quentin Tarantino set is that everyone wants to be there. Like the feeling I felt was like, oh, what a dream.
Like everyone's gunning for that.
Everybody is so excited. And I'm sure it's not. Nothing is perfect ever. And filmmaking, I think on every level is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I think anybody who tells you like, oh, but if you were really working with the big guys, you wouldn't have issues like that's stupid.
Yeah.
It's all the same. It's like people and personalities and talent and trying to get on the same page and vision and how do we do this in 12 hours? It's always the same. So if you like that, then you're probably going to like it at any and every level. But the idea of trying to create projects that people are going to be excited to be on, it's very important to me because I want people to enjoy the process of making the movie and the product if possible. And you don't always get to have that. And so I think those first 2 days especially, it was like, great. So in order to give myself purpose during this pandemic, I have ruined everyone's lives, or at least the next couple weeks of their life or whatever.
No, I hear you. And it kind of felt that way a little bit for the first week.
Yeah, because it was hard.
Of a 2-week shoot.
Was it at the end of that week?
It was that Friday that we did the party scene. Which was another stressful one because we all had to be the luau scene at least was outside. The party scene, we all had to be confined into one room and make it look like a bustling pre-COVID party.
Right.
But it was in the middle of COVID and no one wanted to come and take masks off and be right next to somebody. So
they shouldn't.
Right.
You know?
I mean, we were asking something maybe irresponsible, but we were trying to be as responsible about it as possible and take temperatures and only take masks off when needed. But we got a good group of people from Studio C and from our own group of friends and just like people who were doing us serious favors. You can even see like members of the crew in certain shots who are putting jackets on to like look like different people in the background. It's just like, I mean, was a sense of like just trying to make it work in the moment, which again, I think is why it was so good that we weren't married to like how perfect this was going to turn out. We knew what we wanted it to look like and feel like, and however we could get that, I think we weren't picky.
Yeah. For sure. And we ended up having to reshoot that scene.
We had to reshoot it anyway. So just goes to show that B unit days are a miracle in and of itself.
It's wild. It was just a crazy process and it started off really rocky.
Second week, though, we just did like mostly all the car stuff. And that was when I really felt like, oh my goodness.
We might finish this.
We can do this. Because we got a process trailer for way cheaper than it should have actually cost because the people there were so gracious and so great to us. And we're just excited that we were trying to make something right now. And so we got into that process trailer and we're like doing like 10, 15 pages a day.
Oh, yeah. We were cranking it out because you and I were pretty tight on our lines, which is good.
Yeah. So I felt like that was really a time where I felt like momentum was picking up. We could make this movie. We knew like kind of how the tone of most of this movie was going to feel because it was in our control.
Sure.
And then the last few days we got Anne and Julia.
We did like
all the Nana stuff, all the
phone
stuff.
calls and all that stuff.
Gosh, it was just so fun to work with someone who like got the humor. Like those scenes with Julia in the forest and the wrestling scenes, I think was just like a wonderful way to end it.
It's so true.
It was just a pick-me-up of recognizing, oh, someone else, like even if they don't know the whole story of what we're shooting yet, like they're excited and they're bringing something that we didn't even write. They're bringing something of their own to it. I think that was a huge pick-me-up for me.
Yeah, I mean, Julia's incredible. She was like definitely, she was just like a shot in the arm for me because I felt like she showed up and it felt like someone got what we were trying to do and was on board and was going to elevate it because she's an incredible improviser. But the very first thing we shot together was us wrestling on the ground after I tackle her. And it was incredible. It was incredible. She was just like, we were just immediate sisters and friends, and it was not a big deal.
You stick your fingers in a stranger's mouth.
She stuck her fingers in my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I felt for her more than me, actually, because I was like, that's grosser for her because she doesn't know where my mouth's been and her fingers, whatever. But like, I felt...
This is an insight into your brain of how you treat yourself in terms of other people.
I guess that's fair.
But who cares about my mouth?
Who cares about me?
Her fingers.
No, but I just was really, really grateful for her. And I think we got really lucky with the people we got to work with in general. It was... We were able to, we definitely wrote the movie to involve as little face-to-face with other people as possible. We ended up casting Steven, actually not because we didn't have other options, but because we knew he would nail it, and he did. Yeah. He was so good. Yeah, I'm really But glad. Also it was like very safe option, and we stayed distanced from him even during that scene. That was part of the reason I feel like we decided to do a pandemic movie, was so that we could film it safely. But there were a couple of scenes, like the thing with the party and the luau and with Aaron and the tackling, that were truly like not pandemic friendly, even though they took those were the only things that were truly like, maybe you shouldn't film that during a pandemic. Right. You know,
we could end up having disastrous consequences because of this, like, you know, fanciful idea that we had, and we chose like to have a few risks. I mean, we were very fortunate that it was, it ended up being a safe thing in the end, but.
Right. Well, other huge pick-me-up. Talk to me more about this, but do you remember when Sorø got involved? Do you remember when you reached out to them in the first place?
Yeah. So I reached out to them actually back in like January of 2020 for my other screenplay. And we had like started talking about it, but they wanted to know like who I had in mind for directors, and I hadn't gotten that far yet. So the conversation had kind of been put on hold. And then once we made this, I got in contact with him again saying like, hey, Scott Christopherson with Sorø Films. I just said like, hey, I have another screenplay. If you're interested, it's like tiny road trip comedy pandemic. Let's just chat. And he was interested. And we had already, like, we were in pre-pro at this point. We were in production at this point.
We just couldn't, we were on a train that had no time for anyone to even, like, hop on. Because we got to a point where we were just like, if we don't make this movie right now, we don't submit it to festivals. We don't want to submit it to festivals for next year after the pandemic or whatever happens. Maybe it's in the middle of an 8-year pandemic. We didn't know.
Right.
But we were like, as far as relevancy goes for this tiny little film,
like now or
this
never.
might be like the only time we want to do something like this.
And that's what I would tell first-time filmmakers as well, is that like when you're waiting for someone else to come on board, I guarantee you your project will look much more interesting when you're already making it or when you've made it. And that's just the truth of it. Everyone was always telling me like, oh, it's the chicken or the egg, right? Like, you need to like have funding before you can, you know, make something, but like people don't want to give you money until you've made something, or, you know, and so I was so tired of that we were just like, okay, we're going to make it either way. We're going to make it with our budget. But then once we had it and it was kind of leaving the ground, I think that's what actually like attracted any eyes to it, was that it was actually getting made and it wasn't just being like cooked up in our, you know, our office for 10 years.
Right. I think there's an energy to momentum.
There
I think it's exciting to other people. I know I'm excited by it when I see it too. I'm like, well, that's moving. I want to get on that moving thing. Yeah.
So we ended up pitching to Sorø during a lunch break while we were in production. And it was the worst pitch I think I've ever been a part of in terms of like how it got started.
I forgot about that.
It just like our computer had crashed, and so I was restarting it while we were on a phone call with them, and it took like 20 minutes for that computer to start, and we were like already crunched for time because this was during a lunch break. But we were trying to impress these people, saying like, "Please invest in our film."
Yeah, our tiny film.
I promise we have our crap together, but we can't get this computer started. But it ended up going well. We talked to them about just like, yep. This is the script. These are the characters. This is the vibe. We know it because we are literally making it. Like, we know what this film needs to look like. Do you want in? And end of that day, right? We were filming the windmill stuff.
Yeah.
Or no, we were going to the side of the road for the
biker stuff?
For the biker stuff.
Yeah.
Once you pour all the water on my face. We were heading to that place, and we got the email saying that they wanted in. And that was like, gosh, that just elevated the whole experience to a new level, because we knew then, like, breath of fresh air. We just knew, like, okay, we don't have to be asking people for favors now. We can actually pay them a normal day rate. That was my first thought. Was like, Our crew must feel so much more excited to be on a set knowing that they can make their actual rates.
Mm-hmm.
And then also knowing like we can afford a post-production process and we might actually be able.
Barely thought about.
We hadn't even thought about that. It was really, you were our post-production. That was what we had thought.
And Troy was going to do DIT and he was going to do all of the graphics by himself.
For every phone call.
Yeah.
Green screening and all of that, which is just insane.
Absolutely insane.
We would have never gotten it done in time, just knowing what we know now. But at the time, we were scrappy and we were working hard. But knowing that we had this budget now that was afforded to us to take our film to an actual like doable level at this timeline, I think just like revved us up. It also gave us even more accountability of knowing like we need to finish this film now, not just for ourselves, but for these other people who believe in it and who are putting a stake in it as well.
Yeah.
I think it just like definitely took us to that next phase. And we ended up being able to afford an awesome graphics team that got us across the finish line for our Sundance deadline, at least.
Extremely efficiently and kindly and patiently. And they were incredible. Heck Video.
Yeah, Heck Video.
Incredible.
And on top of that, they got us across into festivals, which we had no idea what we were doing with festivals. We just knew, like, we're going to submit. And Sorø was the one that was like, okay, like, we need a PR team. What's your press kit going to look like? What, all these questions that, like, hadn't even considered. We just were like, well, we're going to submit, and then we will be submitting.
We'll submit on the day that we have to?
That was our kind of last thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, the way that I felt about Sorø was, these feel like people who like films and the people who make films. And I think that both of those things are important when finding partners, especially like in relationships that are long-term and that involve money and like conversations. If you're a person who likes people and money, but not films, then when the rubber hits the road and I say something like, we need $10,000 more, or we need an extra day or something like that, because the film is going to suffer if not, they don't care.
Right.
They don't care. And if you have someone who likes films and money, but not people, then the whole process is miserable because you hate each other the whole time. So even if your goal is like, hey, yeah, we just want to make the most money possible, whatever, but you hate each other. So it's wonderful. And
we've had experiences with all sorts of those Venn diagrams.
Yeah, we have.
And so I think we were bracing ourselves for like, well, if we introduce anyone else into this equation, is it going to make the process not enjoyable? But like as soon as we talked to Sorø, it was very clear they were filmmaker focused. They wanted to help us make a good film. They gave us all the resources with none of the creative pressure, which I can't imagine anyone having that lucky of an experience. But I hope more people get to have that kind of experience with their films. Because it was just such a joy to be able to say, like, to have someone tell us, here's our editors. They're giving notes. What do you think? Like, after we give you all of these resources, what step do you want to take? Instead of like, we require you to do this, this, and this. We'd worked for clients. We'd worked for people in the past who often dictated the creative direction of something. And luckily, their creative choices were often like very spot on with ours, and we were on the same page. But just knowing that we had that flexibility with someone that's like, wow, you gave us the funds to make this, but we're not like handcuffed to a vision that we don't love. Was just a huge miracle in and of itself. So, long story short, we made a film and it was tough. But we finished editing it in October. Right. And then it was out of our hands and in the hands of our VFX team, our SFX team, and our colorist. And at that point, like we like finally had a breath for like about a month and a half. And my mom even like asked me for a little blurb from our family for their Christmas newsletter. And I forgot we made the movie. Yeah. I put all these different things going on in the year and like, yeah, we've basically been like staying home. And I about pressed send and I was like, oh my gosh, we made a movie.
We just made it so fast. It was like a dream,
fast and furious. Yeah, it was so intense. And then just like having that moment of respite, just like it was like my brain blew up a little bit.
Yeah.
But then January 5th, January 6th,
somewhere
around there, we got an email from South by Southwest.
Right. After only receiving rejections.
Yeah, we got rejected from Sundance, which we were anticipating.
Yeah, we were anticipating. We kind of knew, but we used it as our fence post regardless. Right. Like, we're going to try and get there because it was the first of a bunch of different deadlines. And so we just went for it,
And we got rejected from a few other small, lower tier film festivals.
So it started to really feel like, okay, maybe we won't be doing a festival run of any kind.
We've been talking about just like, what's our plan B for just like no exposure? Where do we go from here?
And festivals were different too. Like when when Sundance got back to us about with our rejection letter, they said that how many films did they normally take?
Like 270, 280 or something like that.
It was something in the 200 range, and they only took 70 films that year, like 70 feature films. And so it started to feel too like, oh, so we've made a movie the worst possible year you can make a movie.
We will not get into any places.
Right.
And so the next big one was South by Southwest. And we assumed, because that was like, and we I think put it on the same tier as Sundance because we knew how good of a fit it was for our film. And South by usually does like doing more comedies. And just looking at movies that have premiered there, like Bridesmaids premiered at South by Southwest.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so just looking at different films that I've idolized, I thought like, gosh, pie in the sky.
Right.
If we could get into South by Southwest,
right,
I would just die. But it's not going to happen. We were like, none of us were assuming it. So when we got the email and I like looked down, I was like trying to order something on Amazon. And so I was like checking for the confirmation email and I saw South by Southwest and I was like, and it was like 3 or 4 emails from South by at once. And so I was like,
the big envelope.
It was the big envelope. And I like opened one and just saw like, congratulations. I was like, and we were like setting up a bunk bed for our kids. So I was screaming and Steven was screaming and our kids were screaming and they didn't know why. But it was just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Even just relating this story, I'm feeling all the feelings again of like, holy crap. We just got into this festival. And I started crying and we shared it with everybody. And that was crazy.
Yeah, it was really crazy. I mean, I think especially because by that point, like kind of like you said, we'd made it so quickly, it was almost like it didn't happen. And then receiving all those rejection letters, which of course is a huge part of it.
Yes.
Huge part of anything in the film industry is just intense rejection. Yeah. Even once you make something, it's like, not everyone's going to like it. A lot of people probably aren't going to like it, and I think the sooner that you get comfortable with all of that, those various types of rejection, the better. But it was just extremely unexpected for us. Extremely.
And then just like the world just opened up a little bit. There was like this giant like light that just filled everything. We ended up getting like more emails afterwards of like, not only were we accepted, we found out that week that they wanted to highlight us in a group of only like 8 other films.
Yeah.
To just kind of show what was being premiered at South by, give everyone a taste, because we recognized they gave us an acceptance letter a lot earlier than we were anticipating.
Oh yeah, we were part of like the early acceptance group.
The early acceptance, so we had to keep it quiet for a little bit longer. But then they announced us with only a handful of other films to say like, hey, check it out. These are some things that we'll be showing at South by. So because of that, we got, I think, way more exposure than we ever would have gotten if we had just like gotten in and like hoped that someone would pick us out of a crowd.
Sure.
And I think part of that was because we made COVID specific content. I think actually that was probably the reason.
Comedy.
We made a COVID comedy and we recognized as we were making it that lots of people were making COVID films.
It made it scarier. I mean,
we weren't sure if we should do it.
Yeah, like everybody's going to be making COVID stuff right now. Like at the time, I'd gotten a couple of random audition offers for Zoom movies and pandemic movies and stuff like that. They were all like horror, thriller, or like dramas about people who were isolated from each other and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it just felt like there is going to be a tidal wave.
And we almost thought we should pull out. But then just the feedback we've gotten since then is just that like there are hardly any comedies about COVID.
Right, because it was
extremely depressing. It's a very dark time in history. I didn't feel very lighthearted. No. But we made this in spite of how we felt as like a hope, right? It was like hoping for everyone to come together and experience something that could get us through this. And
it was a relief. It was a relief to joke about it. It was a relief to write something that was lighthearted. It was a relief to try and create characters who would work through the pandemic by laughing together.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what we would naturally do anyway. Most people were laughing their ways through this pandemic with their trusted family members or whoever was living in their communities and whatever, living situation. I think that it feels more like life when there's comedy involved, at least to me. And maybe it's just because I'm a big old goof, but it was a relief to make. I hope it's a relief for people to watch.
And so when we recognized that was a big standout for it, we got a bunch of attention from there. We were able to land a seriously amazing sales team, XYZ.
We love XYZ.
And I think just like everything here is bonus for me. Like we've talked about this so much. Everything
from
here
the beginning,
is
right?
bonus, right? Because we just really wanted experience. So then getting exposure, getting like any sort of like potential representation to take this film into a buyer's hands has just been like cherry on top, a massive cherry on top. But something I wanted to talk about was what we were just saying on the phone yesterday about like what a great gift we've been given to make something right now, which I may be just saying on this podcast to hopefully urge anyone to like just make something right now. Like make it right now while we're all experiencing this collective process of media consumption. Because I think we all recognized when we first saw that SNL pandemic version, like media is different right now. We have a different set of expectations. When people watched Father of the Bride 3.
Oh, yeah.
And just like recognizing like, wow. And Parks and Rec, all these people were coming together to make something with a much different set of expectations of what we can possibly make.
What we can pull off visually.
Exactly. So I think that's honestly what people have been coming into our film thinking, like, oh, they made this during the pandemic. It was also our first film, and we made it with like tiny budgets. So we were making it as a first-time filmmaker. Right. That's the constraints we were coming at it with.
Right.
But everyone else is watching it with the constraints of, yep, we're all in this pandemic together, and here's what people have been able to make. Mm-hmm. So because those have aligned, I think it's just been this beautiful experience of like, here's what we can give you, and everyone is saying, yes, we accept what you can give us, and we appreciate it. So I would just urge like anyone who can make something right now, do it, because like, standards are like flexible. We are understanding of what media means right now. And I think it's also just opening the door for lots of people to try things and enter for their first time. And we're just being much more welcoming because we're like, hey, we get it. It's hard.
Yeah, I feel like the film and the film, I think, have been given tons of extra credit for attempting to do something right now. And I think that there's just a benefit to we've had some people say, if you had told me you were making a COVID road trip comedy during the pandemic, I would have told you that all of those specific things were a bad idea and that you should not do them. But that's the way this cookie crumbles in general. Like you can get advice and you can learn the rules and then you figure out what's right for you in your life. And I just think the less precious that we are about, especially like I was saying before, our first film, those first little babies, and the more interested and invested we are in our long-term selves, our long-term careers, and what we really want to do with our lives, I think the more that we'll learn. The process is everything.
It is. I don't think this would have ever been worth South by and all of the attention we've been getting post that if the entire experience had just been like, gosh, like this better get me my money back. This better get me some meetings.
That is the truth. I mean, I think we get to we get to like put that tiny feather in our cap. Like we are definitely representing what it is to fall in love with the process and let the chips fall where they may, because I could say with full confidence that I would not regret making this movie if we hadn't gotten in anywhere. Mm-hmm. Or if we hadn't, I mean, the main thing is like when people invest in your work, you really want them to make that money back. And we really, really hope that we can get Sorø a good return on this film. But it's all part of the process. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just like, hopefully if you figure out that you actually like the process, you've got a home here forever for your whole life. No matter what happens. Yeah. Like we're going to make bad films. We're going to make good films. We're going to make things that offend people. We're going to have to apologize. We got to be gritty and stretchy and resilient and hopefully really into what we do. And yeah, I'm just learning a lot about that right now.
Yeah. Just keep building us up as people.
As far as the future of Recovery, we premiere on
Wednesday,
St. Patrick's Day,
March 18th.
March 18th? It's not 17th?
17th. Yep, that's St. Patrick's Day.
On St. Patrick's Day.
March 17th.
And as distribution and all of like the possible streaming things come out.
We're still up for acquisition right now. Mm-hmm. And let's see, the time, it's 12 p.m. Central time.
Yeah. So if you'd like to follow the film, mm-hmm. where's the best place to go?
You go to southbysouthwest.com. Mm-hmm. Because they're doing an online film festival this year, it's a little bit different. You're not registering for a specific movie. You are buying an online pass, which actually I'm very excited for because there are a lot of movies I'm excited for. There's like, I'm just going to promote one other one right here on this real estate. Alien on Stage. I'm so excited to see. It's a documentary about this like little British bus troupe that goes around and performs Alien on stage all around the UK. I'm so like, I want to see that so bad.
I'm registered.
There's so many good ones out there that I'm excited to see. So you would need to register with South by Southwest and get your online pass, and then you have access to all of the films if they still have seats available, which Recovery does have seats available. We're about halfway filled up, I think. We're around like 1,000 seats left.
I'll take it.
So yeah, that would be the way that you'd see it for now. And details coming, I guess, if it's up for distribution, where to see it after that.
That's all.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To find out who our next guest is and to stay up to date on all of our projects and announcements, follow us on all major social media platforms @Sorø Films. What makes this podcast distinct is that we put you, the audience, in the driver's seat. Influence the conversation by submitting questions for our guests ahead of each episode via Instagram. Sorø Films helps in all aspects of the filmmaking process, including funding, production, marketing, and distribution, with a focus on emerging feature filmmakers. If you're developing a project you'd like to pitch to us, you can submit it at sorofilms.com/submissions.